Good morning. It's 9 a.m. I'm Dale Berman, Chairman of the Finance and Budget Committee, which I call to order on Wednesday, February 23rd, 9 a.m. We have a roll call, please.
Leonard,
Leonard here.
Ford,
Board present.
Martin,
Martin present.
Sanchez,
Sanchez here.
Sturgis,
Sturgis here.
Tepe,
Tepe here.
Hurog, Shepro, Berman.
Berman's here.
We have a quorum.
Motion to approve our minutes from January 26th.
Tepe moves.
Pepe moves,
Board second.
Ford second. Any changes, discussion? Roll call, please.
Ford,
Yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Sanchez, yes.
Sturgis,
Sturgis, yes.
Tepe,
Tepe, yes.
Berman, yes.
passes.
Is there anyone to make public comments? Anyone online?
You have one here.
We do? What?
I've signed the sheet here.
Mr. McQuillan.
Oh, I'm sorry. Would you come speak? I couldn't see him.
I am speaking on something that's on the agenda. Bob McQuillan, 465 Walcott Lane, Batavia, Illinois, and that's in District 2. According to the agenda this morning, the committee is here to discuss and approve 235 pages on the agenda of the meeting. I'm just wondering how many people on the committee or on the board itself have actually read the 235 pages and understand everything that's on those pages. I'm doing that just so that we don't run into the problem that you did several years ago when $58,000 in tuition reimbursement or quote unquote training was approved by the county board 17 times. On the agenda this morning, under Resolution U, it states that you are to, I guess, and approve a new training policy. And this goes back to my previous comments that since the $58,000 in tuition reimbursements were discovered, so far, the P card charges, the tuition reimbursement plan, and now the training plan has been up for review and change. I believe this directly goes to my point earlier that there were issues and problems with how the tuition reimbursement program and the $58,000 was spent and approved. If this wasn't true, those three policies would not have been up for review and suggested for change. Just a few points about the training policy itself. There are some good things that have been changed and maybe some additional changes that I would suggest that the committee think about. And you have the opportunity today to pull Resolution U out of the consent agenda and discuss it, because that is the role of any committee. The changes that I agree with are under the policy. It says, maximize their effectiveness in their current position with Kane County. Again, I repeat, current position. It's not to be done for a new trade or business and is not to be met the minimum requirements to be qualified for their current position. The education is required by the employer, a negotiating agency, or the law for the employee to keep their current position. Training funds cannot be used for expenses that are considered qualifying education tuition under the Education Tuition Reimbursement Program. Education that will satisfy the minimum requirements for a promotion or that qualify the employee for a new trade or business are not allowed under the training program. I think there's some confusion here between education and training. It's been used intermittently, and I think that it needs to be changed to training so that there's no education versus tuition on an educational program done. It says general education courses and non-related prerequisites are not considered work-related for the purpose of the training policy. I agree with that, but I also think that you need to include that it is not to be used for courses towards a undergraduate or graduate degree.
All right, your time is up. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Appreciate it. I'm here to answer any questions the committee might have.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Any other public comments? Moving on to Treasurer's report. Mr. Kilborn?
Good morning.
Morning.
Before you in the agenda packet is my office's report. If you have any questions on that, I'm willing to respond to those. Just information as I've been providing to you over the last couple of months. Inflation, high inflation is still with us. Last week's report on the producer price index indicated over a 12-month that rose 9.7%. The minutes from the last Fed Open Market Committee meeting indicates that they are still looking to raise rates. Remember, it's a balancing act. If they raise rates too quickly and too highly or too high, it risks cutting off growth and hiring. They're currently looking at, in the March meeting, anticipated a 0.25%. There is some leaning towards a 0.5% increase in the rate. You may ask yourself, what does inflation cost? A recent study showed that current inflation level costs households in the United States about $275 a month additional over the previous year due to the current rate of inflation. Inflation was caused by government action and the COVID pandemic. We have to trust that government action that they're looking at or action from the Fed will be able to tame inflation as we move forward. Any questions?
Madam Chair?
I understand that in Illinois, that inflation rate is slightly less, 6.75% or around that range. But the real question I wanted to ask is, with the troubles that we're having in Europe right now, how will that impact us?
It was not reflected in the last Fed meeting, which is January, but from what I've been reading, the most negative impact will be on energy prices, which is a portion of inflation, but not an overriding portion at this point. The market has responded to Ukraine in the price of oil going over $100 a barrel now. I don't want to say the good news because there's no good news about the situation in Ukraine is that we're towards the end of the winter season.
We may want to go back to take a look at a modeling. It brought to my attention as well, we forget that during the issue with George Bush, gas prices went up to over $5 a gallon in some parts of the country. So that may be something we can go back and reflect and see how that worked and how it impacted our county.
I've seen some information nationally in reference to the last time interest rates were raised by the Fed in 2015, and they anticipate that these rates will probably be raised a little quicker and a little higher in regards to the inflation rates we're facing now.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions, any other comments? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item 5, the Finance Director, Mr. Hansick.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Okay, I have included in the agenda packet, as always, we have the budget versus actual variance reports. So those are just the general reports that are typical every month. At the beginning of my finance director's report, I just wanted to, again, just let you know where we're at with the fiscal year 21 audit. The final field work is scheduled to begin March 7th, so that's just a couple weeks away. When we have much work to do between now and then in terms of preparing for it, as well as even after they arrive. It's an incredible amount of work to get done, actually. New for fiscal year 21, as I've mentioned before, is that we have the implementation of accounting and financial reporting changes, which require that we report as revenue and expenditures what normally were just reported as liabilities within the agency funds. This is a tedious project that Baker Tilly will be assisting us with, but because of that, what dawned on me is that these are going to be additional revenues that will need to be factored in to the whole calculation of revenue that is going into the calculation of the revenue recoupment. So we will not have final revenue figures until this project is completed, which means we won't have the final revenue recoupment figure also until this project is completed. It's being done as part of the audit, so it should be done over the next month, I would anticipate, but that is an unusual delay and why we wouldn't have final revenue figures sooner than we will have. Also, I should point out that we do not yet have, as the finance department side of the allocation of investment revenue finished. We have a few more months to get caught up on and doing that. And so that will also affect the amount of revenue that will be part of the final fiscal year 2021 total. The general fund expenses are mostly final at this point. Again, we have the exception of some of these agency funds, which normally would have these expenses recorded as offsets to liabilities, but instead they need to be recorded as expenses. That will be part of this project that will delay the final portion of the expense side of the financial statements. But actually, the general fund expenses are mostly final, and that's what we'll be focusing on when it comes time to allocating excess revenue over expenditures. We'll be focusing on revenue in the general fund and expenditures in the general fund. I do have an estimate of that included in this packet, which I'll refer to in a little bit. And just to remind you, audited financial statements will not be available until the end of May when everything is finalized. The transition audits are still underway. The final steps of them are being conducted as part of this audit field work. And so we anticipate that those will be done as soon as that's completed. I do have several variance explanations included for this point in the year. This is through, let's see, the month of January in terms of expenditures compared to a date budget as to where we would typically see expenses or on average be. And this gives you an indication of where we are in comparison to that. I do have a small section following the variance section that's titled lump sums paid out by county officials. I did send you an update to that I worked on during the night, actually. It was brought to my attention that there were some other similar types of distributions that had occurred earlier in the year that I wanted to make sure were included in this so that it did not appear as if any particular area was being singled out, but this pretty much represents, as far as we understand and are able to find, these types of payments that were made throughout the fiscal year and the total, and then the impact on the excess revenue of expenditures. Speaking of, or now the preliminary estimate of excess revenue over expenditures, we do have, at this point, it appears about $6.7 million just in expenditure savings alone. And it looks like we're very close on the revenue side, and that's still yet to be determined. But on the expense side, at this point, we have about $6.7 million of savings compared to budget. And this is explainable by a number of reasons. Primarily, the savings occurred as a result of vacancies and the result of the impact of COVID on the county's operations. So it is our responsibility then to figure out how to allocate the $6.7 million. And we need to do this before our fiscal year is closed, which we're talking about by the end of April. So basically we have one more month to figure this out. And even after approving of an allocation by the county board, you can always go back and change it so that it's not going to set it in stone. The important thing is that we move it out of the general fund and into at least a couple different reserve funds. And then at some point down the way, we can further allocate it out for specific purposes if the board chooses to, or rebalance it between those two funds or three funds. So what I'm proposing, at least initially, based on what we've done in the past and what we know, is that since about $500,000 of these savings, operational savings, were generated by the sheriff's office, and since his area is in need of funding for sheriff's vehicles every year, what we've started to do a few years ago is to allocate savings from his area for that purpose. It's always appropriate to use operational savings, which are considered one-time events, to fund one-time expenditures such as the purchase of capital. So this is entirely appropriate to do so, and it seems fitting to do so given that they were generated by that area. Then, since we have such an extraordinary need for both capital and for the county's future operating needs, I'm proposing that we just split it in half and put half of it in the property tax freeze protection fund, which would be used to tap into to help fund operating needs, and then put the other half in the capital fund. But that's just my suggestion, and if you have a different idea, certainly please, that is up to you. And then also what we normally do is, since this is preliminary and since we need to make a decision before the final figures are in, what we normally do then is add a provision that allows the property tax freeze protection fund to be adjusted for whatever the difference might be between this estimated figure and what the final figure is, so that we can come as close as we possibly can to allocating the full amount out of the general fund so that it doesn't get absorbed by the general fund at year end. Shared and direct state tax revenue. We're already, after 2 months, we're doing very well in terms of how we were at in the same position last year. We're at $1.5 million ahead of of where we were year to date last year at this time in terms of sales tax, local use tax, RTA sales tax, state income tax, and personal property replacement tax. And almost in the same way, we're that much ahead of the budget by $1.4 million. So this is very encouraging. We'll have to see how this year unfolds with the state of the economy, but so far we're off to a good start. Our health insurance fund monitoring, it has hardly changed since my last report, and that is because I'm still focused on the year, the end of the year for fiscal year 2021, and there's very little activity that pertains to that. However, just in the last couple of days, I was able to post the final adjustments for expense as well as revenues, and so I should have an update for you probably at the executive committee. Okay, let's see. American Rescue Plan funding status. I've taken the same format as I had for you last month, and I just updated it with that last column on the right-hand side in terms of where we're at. It's from the finance department's perspective. I know there's a lot of activity and consideration and discussion going on within the American Rescue Plan Committee, and that's not all reflected here. But these are the more of the firm commitments and then the estimates that I would be responsible for in providing to you. And so that's what's included here. So if you look at that last column, you can see that if you just run down the figures, the revenue recoupment, that actual revenue recoupment for 2020, of course, that doesn't change. That's been the same now, basically, although we did make that one correction about a month ago. Let's see, the budgeted revenue recoupment for FY22 is unchanged and will be as we move through the year because it's compared to budget. And unless we change the budget, that's not going to change. Contract tracing, that's something we've already funded. Additional funding of contract tracing, we've already funded that. Reimbursement to county for COVID-19 expenses have already been funded. And the administrative expenses, this is what has been already incurred to date, and that really hasn't changed. All right, let's see. Then in the potential allocations, which is not yet budgeted, we have the 2021 revenue recoupment. Here you'll see a significant change from where we started in our original estimate of $16.6 million. Then last month, it was brought down to 6.3 million, and now we're only down to 230,000. And that's because of all the additional revenue that's come into 2021, which was greater than what we had budgeted, and an increase over the previous year. The estimate for 2023 revenue recoupment has not changed. Then we have the personnel expense reimbursements for 2021, 22, 23. I have not updated them, although I am currently working on the personal expense reimbursement for 2021. That's going to take about a solid week of work to calculate. And once I have that, then we'll be able to do a resolution to reimburse the county for whatever amount that would be. And then the other items, nonprofit allocation and the approved administrative expenses have not changed. Capital fund status, we're just early into the year, so there's only 9% expended for building management, 38% for information technology. As far as the contingency balances, we have about $350,000 remaining, and this is for the fiscal 21 contingency. And that's because as part of what is being presented to you this morning, we needed to amend the coroner's budget to make up for the difference in what had originally been budgeted and his actual expenditures. And we had to tap into the contingency to do that. And that's why it's brought it down to the 348,000. We also then at the end of the year, we dip into the contingency for adult prisoner room and board. It was a small $8,000 expense this last year, so that left 41,000 of the original 50,000. And we have the full, $1,050,000 contingencies left for fiscal year 22. As far as our reserves that we pay attention to in terms of what we can use for operating if we need to, we have the almost $4.5 million of savings from COVID-19. We still have that $125,000 left in reserve for the JJC build out. We only have about $400,000 in the property tax protection fund, and we have a small increase in the emergency reserve as a result of interest income. The purchasing report, there's been about 4 different RFPs, bids, RFQs that began in January. And there are currently 4 bids and 2 requests for proposals and 2 requests for qualifications that are at various stages. The bid savings for the month, for this specific bid for household hazardous waste is $23,000 over a period of 5 years, which would be $116,000. And then we have some savings from vehicle purchases of $11,360. We have some auction proceeds of $8,750 for a total savings of $147,000. So that covers everything in my report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Question, Shepro?
Yes, Mr. Shepard.
Good morning, Joe. I have a question on that revenue recoupment that started at 16 million and is now down to, I think you said, 230,000.
Yes.
What does that number mean in terms of when we were doing the budget, we were talking about a $15 or $16 million shortfall in the budget. Does this mean that gap is shrunk to 230,000?
No, this is the revenue recoupment for the fiscal year 2021.
Right. That's the year just ended.
Right.
Yeah.
So maybe I didn't understand the question. I'm sorry.
Well, okay. I mean, when we were looking at the finances, and forgive me because I'm not sure I understand this, is that we were looking at a big deficit.
Mhm.
And now it looks as if, at least based on the recoupment, that deficit has evaporated.
Claire, could you share that page, please?
Who's speaking? Oh, Bates?
Bates, please.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, this is Leonard. Could I make a comment on that, please? I would yield to Mr. Leonard.
Thank you. Mr. Leonard, go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Shepard, I think the point that we're making here, or that Mr. Onsick is making, is for the 21 year. When we were estimating the budget for 22, we started out at about a $15 to $16 million deficit. And then we reduced it by not giving certain raises and hiring additional people and got it down to about 9 or 10 million. So we're still at that level, maybe a little bit less for 22, but for 21, Mr. Onsick is saying, there's a variance of about 235,000. So I think we're talking 2 different years. And the budget process that we had spoken about before was for the 22 year, which we're not discussing yet.
But the carryover has changed, obviously. I mean, the deficit that you had going into 22 would seem to then have changed for the better. Is that correct?
Mr. Onsick, I'll defer to you on that.
I'm sorry. I'm still trying to make sure I'm comprehending the question correctly. The deficit was going into the fiscal 20. We started with that $16 million deficit, difference between revenue expenditures.
Right.
For fiscal year 2022. So those are the projected revenues for fiscal year 22. And then we closed that gap by reducing expenditures and then using some of the reserves to close that gap. So it really had nothing to do with the revenue in 2021.
Okay, that was my question.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, Sturgis.
Sturgis.
Ken, I think those are just coincidental numbers.
Okay, that's.
I don't think that
sort
the
of-
16,630 that you're seeing
Yeah.
on screen,
Yeah.
I think that's just a coincidence that you're trying to draw a correlation to.
Very good observation.
Thank you.
Very good.
Chair Tuppy.
Bates, please.
Yes,
Mr. Chair
Bates.
Tuppy.
Going back to the 6.5 million that we have saved. Mr. Anzik, I believe you said that was because we cut several positions that were proposed for the budget. That's where most of that $6.5 million in savings has come from.
Are you referring to the 6.7 million of excess revenue over expenditures?
Yes, I thought it was
Oh,
6.5.
that had nothing to do with any positions that were cut. Those were positions that were approved in the budget, that were budgeted for, and ended up being vacant. So, I mean, that's in several departments across the country. I mean, we have building management vacancies unable to be filled, state's attorney, even in the finance department, we had several months in between a position someone leaving and then being able to fill it. So it's really across the board, and there's other savings as well, but that was, that's the predominant source.
So those were budgeted positions that we canceled due to the budget shortfall. So my question is.
No,
No.
And Mavis, those comments were by Bill Leonard, not from Joe Onsick. So so we're not putting words in Joe's mouth.
Well,
No, these were not canceled positions. They were not. The reason why they weren't filled is we're not able to find people who are willing to work for the wages we offer. Is basically the problem.
Mr. Tepe,
Then I would like to ask, could we, instead of putting this into a fund for for the sheriff's vehicles, could we use these for retention bonuses for our employees so that we don't keep losing employees?
well, we can use it wherever the board feels we should use it. So if there's something you'd like to see, then I guess you need to propose it and we'll go from there.
Okay,
Tepe.
so, but Mr. Anzik is saying we should put these
What her
into
comment
special funds to get them out of the general fund so that they don't get just absorbed.
If I may, just putting these into those funds, like the property tax freeze fund, for example, you can then use that for such a purpose if you choose. You can choose to draw it down for that purpose or move it into another fund for that purpose. So we're not eliminating that option by putting it here. This is just an easy way to get this done. While you have time to think about it more deliberately, how you would like to allocate these funds.
So you were suggesting put it into the capital fund and the property tax freeze fund?
The bulk of it, yes, 3.1 million into each of those two funds, and then the 500,000 into the public safety sales tax fund, which is the fund out of which the vehicles are purchased for the sheriff. I'm always sensitive to that because there's always a need for that, and there's never a way to figure out how to fund that. And so at the end of the year, when he does have operational savings, it seems appropriate to me to recommend that we use it for that. But that's just one opinion, and there's many other ways you can do it.
But we always value your opinion, thank goodness. But so putting it into the capital fund and the property tax freeze fund does not specifically determine what they'll be spent for.
Correct.
It's like a holding place.
It is, and I mean, it splits it according to category, but then these are fully under your control. So if you decide you don't want to put that much into capital, or you want to put more into capital, then you can always change it later.
Okay, thank you.
I think
Is
what-
that- Okay, thank you.
Well, it's suggested, it's Mr. Anzek's suggestion that we do that. That what we can do, anything we really care to do, but his suggestions have always been good, and that's a good place to start. Mr. Tepe?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I have a question on a different subject, so I hope we're done with that one. Okay, my question regards the reports on page 17, which are the ARPA funds and the allocation that you've got there.
Yes,
And, I see that you've allocated revenue recoupment for 2022 and an estimated revenue recoupment for 2023 and an estimated personnel expense reimbursement for 2024.
Vern, could we put those on screen, Blair? The ARPA funds?
It's page 17 of the reports, if that helps you, Blair,
Of the agenda or?
of the agenda.
Thank you.
Good job, Blair. As I say that, you've got estimated personnel expense reimbursement for 2024, and you've got estimated revenue recoupment for 2023, but you don't show estimated revenue recoupment for 2024.
oh, and that's on purpose. I mean, I do make mistakes, but at least this one I know is on purpose. We're only allowed to go through 2023 for revenue recoupment. So they allowed us to go back a year and do revenue recoupment for 2020, which we've already done. So so the 4 years for revenue recoupment were 2020, 21, 22, and 23. And then the 4 years for personnel expense reimbursement, it was 1 year off. And that's why you see that difference.
So we're able to do that for okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Very good. Moving on.
I think that ends my report. So
Item B, discussion items. Item 1, authorizing recruitment of fiscal year 21 lost revenue under the American Rescue Plan Act and related to allocation, budget adjustment, and transfers.
oh, I'm so sorry. I had completely forgot that I put these on the agenda, and it'll just take me a moment to remember what I was thinking. Well, I think basically, I just wanted to provide an opportunity for you to think about this. And maybe now it's becoming more of a moot point as we've seen how little there is to allocate. But once, I guess why I'm bringing this up is that once we have this final figure, you'll have to make a decision quickly as to what to do with that revenue so that we can post it and get it into the ledger before the year is closed. And so I'm just suggesting that you begin thinking about how you would like to allocate that lost revenue recoupment, or it could just be placed into the lost revenue recoupment fund and then allocated later. But that's totally up to you. Those would be the options. Right now, it's looking like it's only $230,000, and there may be nothing by the time we have all the revenue factored in. But that's why I brought this up.
All right, Mr. Tepe?
No, he clarified. I just wanted to make sure he was talking about the $231,000.
Yes.
So
And similarly, we have the reimbursement of COVID-21 related personnel expenses. I am working on that now. And so that is also another opportunity for you to either decide to put it all into a reserve fund. And in fact, one of the items on the agenda here is that there's a special reserve fund for payroll reimbursements. And you could put the entire thing there, or allocate it however you like, but that'll be coming up. And I'm only mentioning this because I don't want to present it to you at the next meeting and then have you suddenly have to think about it and make a decision. So at least you know ahead of time that you can be thinking about it.
Mr. Tebby.
Mr. Onsick, are you suggesting that by taking it out of the reserve fund and moving it, that it's then committed? Because these are estimated
Right. Well, no, we will have the actual amount by the time.
sometime.
Well, my goal is to have it by next meeting.
Okay.
And then that'll be your one and only opportunity to make a decision, which is why I'm worried about, I don't want you to feel rushed. So I'm trying to present it ahead of time.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, I'm sorry.
It's a
Mr. Martin.
kind of a comment and kind of a question. If in the context of wanting to be judicious in how we do this, why wouldn't it be prudent to put it into a reserve fund until the dust settles and we know?
Turn your mic on.
I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Why wouldn't it just simply be prudent to put it into a reserve fund until the dust settles and we know what's going on? I see no purpose in making a precipitous decision when we still haven't been dealt all the cards to know what we're spending it on.
If you're looking for a response from me, then I would say I would agree with you. That's a very, good way to look at it. I think when it comes to revenue recoupment, although, in this case, there's hardly going to be anything. One of the things at least what we did the last time for 2020 was that we had allocated to each of the special revenue funds their share of the lost revenue recoupment because they truly did lose revenue and they have no other way of recouping it. And so we did take the American Rescue Plan revenue recoupment dollars and allocated it directly to the special revenue funds that had lost revenue so that they were made whole, so to speak. And then the remainder that was for the general fund, that's what we used for other purposes. And I think last time it was to fund the security camera project at the jail. So those are the types of decisions, whether you want to just set the whole thing aside into a reserve, or if you want to specifically add it to special revenue funds who may in fact be needing it. I could think of one example in the circuit clerk's area. They have a special revenue fund that's funded by court fees that they're really struggling with because there's not nearly as much revenue as there used to be. And they still have ongoing expenditures. And so that would be an appropriate, place, use for it.
And to the extent we have data,
yes,
fine. I'm just saying if we don't have the box checked yet on what the amount of money is, let's put it in reserve until we know.
And that makes sense because probably by next month, we won't have that data for you to make a decision.
I, for one, would like to see a recommendation couched in those terms. What do we know that has a shortfall that needs to be reimbursed so that we have before us the numbers that you would recommend relative to reimbursing these funds and what have you. And I don't know if it's a consensus of the committee or not, but if that works, that would really assist us at the next meeting when we're making decisions to have a kind of a advisory framework in place so that we're not trying to invent the wheel as we sit at the committee.
Mr. Sturgis.
Mr. Berman, thank you. Sturgis, I can't agree more with John Martin. These are not lose it or, use it or lose it funds. And the reason that we have these reserve accounts or slush funds or whatever, savings accounts, whatever you want to call it, is so that we don't rush in haste to spend this money, that we put it where it's supposed to go so that at a later point in time, if a project does come up, if a situation does come up, we have those reserves to fund them. So
I agree. I think, sometimes we feel that the budget is the thing, but it's just a suggestion and a plan of what we're going to do. And it doesn't always work out that way. And if we can predict what's going to happen, that's fine. But every month, something different comes up. So
I would, to Joe's, that property tax freeze account that Mavis was speaking of earlier, I would think the history of that looks more like a roller coaster than a trajectory.
Agreed.
Yeah, you know, so.
Agreed. Thank you. You got your discussion, Joe. All right. Item C, auditors report, Mr. Wegman.
Hello, good morning. So our report is on file. I do want to point out the fact that we have published or will have officially published our 6-month P card audit on our website today. And we are currently looking for a summer intern. So those are the 2 major items for us.
Very good. Any comments, questions?
Age, background, summer intern, accounting major from a university or high school. So what are you looking for?
College credit.
College credit. Perfect.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, new business. Item A, a resolution authorizing rollover for funds and amending the 2022 fiscal year budget from the circuit clerk's office.
Martin moves.
Martin moves.
Happy seconds.
Happy seconds. Discussion.
Dale, can you refresh me? Are you taking these each individually? Are these roll call? Are they consensus? How are we doing these expeditiously? In the past, I thought that we would just sort of read through these and handle them all at the end, or are you doing these sequentially when a vote on each one?
Well,
and I'm going back to Mr. Hoscheid's days of, he would simply give a explanation of each and then an omnibus vote.
I think he did that at the.
Right, I think we vacillated.
No, I think that's the way he approached it at the executive committee. I think at the committee level, we do each one.
discuss each one.
Got it.
This is not a consent agenda.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay. This is our first opportunity as a committee to see these things. So as opposed to, all right, any discussion on item A? And we need a roll call.
Ford,
Yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Sanchez, yes.
Surges,
Sturgis, yes.
Tepe,
Tepe, yes.
Berman. Passes.
Okay. Item B, resolution authorizing rollover of funds and amending the 2022 fiscal year budget for the state's attorney's office.
Leonard
And-
moves.
Who moves? Leonard moves.
Leonard
second.
moves.
Ford seconds. Any questions? In each case, Mr. Tepe, there is a definition of what it is on the agenda.
But she's sitting right here and she's not in a good mood, so I didn't know what.
I think this should be discussed in depth.
All right, roll call, please.
Ford, Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Sanchez, yes.
Surges,
Yes.
Tepe,
Tepe, yes.
Berman.
Berman, yes.
Passes.
Item C, a resolution authorizing the coroner's office fiscal year 2021 budget adjustments. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
I need a first and second.
Ford moves.
Oh, we don't. Ford moves.
Sanchez, seconds.
Sanchez, second.
Thank you.
More discussion. Roll call, please.
Ford,
Yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Sanchez, yes.
Surges,
Just yes.
Tepe,
Tepe, yes.
Berman.
Berman, yes.
Passes.
Item D, a resolution authorizing miscellaneous fiscal year 2021 budget adjustments. Joe,
Or just moves.
Surges moves.
Ford
Sanchez,
seconds.
second.
Ford second. Mr. Onzik.
Just a brief explanation. Every year we take a look at, once we have expenditures close to being final in the general fund, we look to see that the expenditures within classification are in balance that nothing is over budget according to classification. And that's just to be in keeping with state statutes and with our financial policies. And so elected officials have one set of classifications and department heads have another. And so we just go through and look to see what budgets need to be adjusted. And in all of these cases, we're just taking budget from other line items that they have extra funds in and moving into the line items that may be over budget that are putting that classification over budget. So it's balanced within their department. There's nothing extra being added to their budget.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Ford,
Yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Sanchez, yes.
Surges,
Surges, yes.
Tepe,
Tepe, yes.
Berman.
Berman, yes.
Passes.
And we're on item F.
B.
E, a resolution authorizing fiscal year 21 year-end allocations, budget adjustments and transfers.
Tepe moves.
Deputy moves,
Leonard seconds.
Leonard second, discussion. Mr. Hansick.
Well, and this is the actual resolution that with my suggestions of allocating that $6.7 million, the 500,000 for the sheriff's vehicles, and then 3.1 million each to the capital fund and property tax freeze protection fund. So if you choose to move forward with it as is, then that would be great. If you need one more month to think about it, you can do that, but that would be like the last opportunity to do this.
Thank you. Any discussion? Madam Chair?
I think it's appropriate. We saw a presentation yesterday, if so needed. The capital fund certainly needs much more than the $3.1 million. But I think it's an opportunity that is well measured. And I'm in support of this.
Any other discussion?
I would love another couple of weeks to review it. It's just a big document.
Well, we're just putting it away to be used at a later date. So where we put it doesn't really make much difference.
It's a rainy day fund.
Yeah.
Rained yesterday.
That's exactly what it is.
Any
And-
other
and
discussion?
Any money that would be expended out of this fund would have to be approved of by the board.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
so this can be taken out of this fund and put into a different fund later?
Certainly.
Okay, thanks. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Ford,
Yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Sanchez, yes.
Surges,
Surges, yes.
Tepe,
Tepe, yes.
Berman.
Yes.
Passes.
Thank you. Item F, a resolution authorizing the transfer of adult justice center janitorial and maintenance employees from the Kane County Building Management Department to the Kane County Sheriff's Office, and further authorizing a fiscal year 2022 budget adjustment.
Martin
Surges.
moves.
Leonard
Surges
seconds.
Martin moves, Surges second. Discussion. Roll call, please.
Ford,
Yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Sanchez, yes.
Surges,
Surges, yes.
Tepe,
Tepe, yes.
Berman.
Berman, yes.
Passes.
Thank you. Item G, a resolution authorizing a fiscal year 22 budget adjustment of building management capital funds related to the fiscal year 21 multi-purpose building construction budget.
Surges moves.
Surges moves,
Ford second.
Ford second, discussion. Roll call, please.
Ford,
Yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Sanchez, yes.
Surges,
Surges, yes.
Tepe,
Tepe, yes.
Berman.
Berman, yes.
Passes.
Item H, a resolution approving fiscal year 22 budget adjustment to the Growing for Cane Fund for a local livestock market assessment grant.
Sanchez moves.
Leonard moves.
Andrew Leonard. Discussion. Roll call, please.
Ford,
Yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Sanchez, yes.
Surges,
Surges, yes.
Tepe,
Tepe, yes.
Berman.
Berman, yes.
Passes.
Thank you. I, a resolution ratifying emergency purchase affidavit for Adult Justice Center custodial and maintenance services and authorizing related budget adjustments.
Leonard moves.
Leonard
Sanchez
moves.
seconds. Sanchez seconds.
Sanchez second. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Ford,
Yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Sanchez, yes.
Surges,
Surges, yes.
Tepe,
Tepe, yes.
Berman.
Berman, yes.
Passes.
Thank you. Item J, a resolution authorizing creation of COVID payroll reimbursement fund 357 related to fiscal year 21 and fiscal year 22 budget adjustments and transfer.
Sanchez moves.
Sanchez moves, Ford second. Discussion. Joe?
Yes, and I apologize. I'm sure to read this must look very complicated, and it is in a way. But basically what I was trying to accomplish here is we, in the beginning, when we had the reimbursement of payroll expenses from the CARES Act, we just put it in the special reserve fund, which is a kind of a catch-all fund for placing funds. But because it was such a large amount, and because it's spanning a number of years, and we're tapping into it, and it's becoming more difficult to figure out where we're at with it, we decided it would be better now in hindsight if it were to be in its own fund, so that that's all that's in there. And part of my analysis of trying to create the opening balance for the new fund, I discovered that there was a difference in the opening balance that I had accounted for on when I moved it into the special reserve that we need to correct for. So part of establishing the fund, there's also a correction of the opening balance. And then we're transferring all the activity that has been, going in and out of the special reserve fund, drawing on these COVID savings fund. It'll now all be transferred into this new fund, so that when we close the year, it'll be clean, and you can look in that one fund and see all the transactions, everything that was paid from that source of funds. So that's what this is attempting to do. It's establishing that new fund and then moving all the related transactions into it.
Discussion? Roll call, please.
Ford,
Yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Sanchez, yes.
Surges,
Surges, yes.
Tepe,
Tepe, yes.
Berman.
Thank you. Item K, a resolution authorizing reclassification of reimbursement of COVID-related expenses from savings and special reserve fund to COVID payroll reimbursement fund.
Sanchez moves.
Sanchez moves,
Tepe seconds.
Ford second. Discussion?
This is another attempt to move the transactions that were going to be reimbursed for COVID expense. What we had done originally, I think, from the American Rescue Plan is move funds out of the American Rescue Plan into all the expense accounts that had this COVID expense having been incurred. So that's how we reimbursed it. We just moved funds out of the American Rescue Plan fund into all the individual funds that had the expenses. Where in hindsight now, everything becomes more clear looking back. That's a legitimate way to do it. But then now you have two different ways of how we handle it, and it's inconsistent. So what this is doing is, instead of moving monies into, or kind of like additional revenues into all the funds where these expenses were incurred, we're pulling out those expenses from those funds instead and moving them into the American Rescue Plan Fund, so that when you look at our regular budget, you're not seeing, and expenses, like for example, in the general fund, you're not seeing all those COVID expenses in the general fund and having it distort what otherwise would have been had we not had those COVID expenses. Instead, by doing this, we're going to see those expenses in the American Rescue Plan Fund to be seen as a reimbursement and a utilization of that fund. This is already pre-approved. It's just a different way to account for it. It's not that we're changing anything that was previously authorized. It's just the way we're accounting for it.
Very good. Any,
So, if I may.
Fine.
So, Mr. Onsick, this will allow us, as we review next year's budget allocation, we'll have the actual numbers, not the ARP money that's flowing in. Because the ARP money is a one-time opportunity rather than continual revenue.
Yes, so instead of seeing transfers coming out of the ARP fund into the general revenue fund, those transfers will disappear and instead, and also the COVID expenses will disappear out of the general fund. So you're just looking at what our general fund would have been without COVID expense, without COVID revenues coming in.
Perfect, thank you.
thank you. Any other discussion? We sometimes wonder what we did before COVID and our. Roll call, please.
Ford,
Yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Sanchez, yes.
Surges,
Burgess, yes.
Tepe,
Tepe, yes.
Berman.
Berman, yes.
Passes.
Item L, a resolution authorizing reimbursement of COVID-related expenses from COVID payroll reimbursement funds related fiscal year 21 budget adjustments.
Surges moves.
Sanchez seconds.
Surgeon moves, Sanchez second. Discussion, Mr. Onzick.
Okay, now this is a brand new authorization for reimbursement. And what I'm recommending is we have about $660,000 of unbudgeted COVID-related expenses that are still sitting in the general fund and other funds that were incurred but not yet reimbursed. And since we're at the end of the year, and it's really not feasible to be looking at every single expense and trying to decide if it meets the eligibility criteria to be reimbursed from the American Rescue Plan Fund, I'm proposing that instead of reimbursing it from the American Rescue Plan Fund, we utilize $660,000 of the payroll reimbursement savings. Since there is there's no restrictions on the specificity of whether they're COVID related or not. So we're basically going on the determination that was made by the individual department heads and elected officials. And in my own review of the expenses, it all looks reasonable in my own view. So there's nothing that's strange buried in here. I'm recommending that they be reimbursed out of the payroll savings. So in order to do that, then following this new methodology, this is authorizing that they be moved into the COVID payroll reimbursement fund, the brand new fund we're creating, so that we can see how these expenses are actually being charged there, and that these COVID expenses will no longer be in the general fund and in the other fund. So when we close the year, basically this will have stripped everything COVID related out of the general fund and other funds, and they'll be all in the appropriate, reimbursement fund.
Very good. Any questions, discussion? Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Roll call, please.
Ford,
Yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Sanchez, yes.
Surges,
Burgess, yes.
Tepe,
Tepe, yes.
Berman.
Berman, yes.
Passes.
I thank you. Item M, a resolution authorizing reclassification of ARP-funded COVID mass vaccination expenses and related fiscal year 21 and fiscal year 22 budget adjustments and transfers.
Sanchez moves.
Sanchez moves.
Ford seconds.
Ford second. Discussion. Mr. Hansick?
Okay, now this is a case where we previously authorized that mass vaccination expenses be reimbursed from the American Rescue Plan Fund. We've since learned from the consultants that are assisting the county, or Ernst & Young, that there's an opportunity or potential to be reimbursed from FEMA instead. And so what this is going to do is it's going to remove these expenses from the American Rescue Plan Fund as reimbursements from there. And it's going to instead use the COVID payroll reimbursement fund. Once again, this brand new fund, we're going to move the mass vaccination reimbursement expense to this new fund. So in effect, it's going to be reimbursed out of COVID payroll saving reimbursements, or savings from COVID payroll reimbursements, rather than the American Rescue Plan Fund. So it's reversing the authorization that was made to reimburse it originally from American Rescue Plan Fund, and instead reimbursement from the savings from payroll reimbursements. If I can say it more than
Madam Chair?
once.
Thank you, Joe, for that clarification. And I think we're probably all in support of that, or at least I am. But a question, FEMA, who is going to actually apply for the FEMA grant to get the reimbursement? Have we discussed that yet?
I don't know. I had heard that there were, I mean, maybe Mr. Sanchez knows, but I had heard there was something about doing an RFP for seeking help for that, but I don't know.
And would that come out of COVID savings, or would that come out of the ARPA fund?
I can answer that.
Okay.
Madam Chair, Sanchez here. We're putting together an RFP for services related to FEMA, and the administrative costs for that will come from that FEMA reimbursement. So part of the reimbursement will be the administrative costs, and it won't come from ARPA or the general fund.
Excellent. And when will that RFP be ready?
Shortly, I think Peter's working with purchasing right now, and they're putting that together. So,
Very good. Sooner the better.
yeah, I agree.
Very good. Thank you.
Very good. Any more discussion? Any questions? Roll call, please.
Ford,
Yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Sanchez, yes?
Surges,
Yes.
Tepe,
Tepe, yes.
Berman.
Yes.
Passes.
Thank you. Item N, the resolution authorizing acceptance of fiscal year 22 COVID-19 response grant agreement.
Sanchez moves.
Sanchez moves.
Ford seconds.
Ford second. Any discussion?
Sanchez?
Sanchez, yes.
Just briefly, this is some money that we're getting from the state. It's not, it does say here COVID-19 surveillance and testing, but that, to my knowledge, doesn't include contact tracing. I know that's a question that's been asked. But otherwise, this is another instance of us saying yes to free money from the state. So I support it.
All right.
Absolutely.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Ford,
Yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Sanchez, yes?
Surges,
Surges, yes.
Tepe,
Tepe, yes.
Berman.
Berman, yes.
Mr. Berman,
Madam Chair?
if I may, just a reflection. So the amount of money that we have spent minus the contact tracing, which is billed as used. If we don't use it, we don't pay for it. But all the other expenses, will that then be a net neutral? So the mass vac centers that went out, staffing for additional supplies, IT support, eventually will that be net neutral? So there'll be no expenses that have come out of the general fund to support those efforts. Is that what we're looking at?
To be the-
I can't say definitively. Saying all of the COVID-related expenses from public health, will they be eventually covered by
That's what I'm asking.
grant types of
yes.
money? I don't know if that will ultimately happen. I mean, with the ARPA funds, obviously there's the opportunity there for a lot of recoupment on these costs and FEMA. But things like this just pop up. The state has given us money before for contact tracing, for instance. But that was only temporary money that was released. So we've had to fund the rest ourselves. So I can't say if that will, in the end, will all be covered from grant money, but
And that money for the contact tracing is coming out of the ARP funds, correct?
currently, yes.
So, yeah, the feds are supporting it.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, Mr. Chair, I believe this funding money was just distributed to us. I don't think we applied for this.
Well,
Isn't that correct, Mr. Sanchez?
I don't know exactly. I
Thought it
think
was
we have to,
allocated, thought it was allocated by the state based upon population.
I still think we have to apply for it, but it's not like a typical grant process. There's some paperwork that has to be filled out, but
Or
it's pretty much,
They told us what to apply for and said, here's the form.
yeah.
the reason why I bring this up, this conversation, is obviously support of getting federal and state support for the efforts that King County has well done to fight COVID. But I know that there has been some recent discussion with the Public Health Committee that we are spending too much money, allocations are going out that perhaps should not be allocated any longer. My point is that if the need is still there, perhaps not as great. A conversation was had that if the little kids 5 and under vaccine is approved, that Mass Vac site will have to remain open. So I want to assure the board that why there is, in my perception, still a need to keep that one center open for a variety of different reasons. That if money is available to support it, this should be something that we continue to support until a health department tells us otherwise.
Well,
And that'll be.
Madam Chair, on my area, I had suggested that we look at closing it because I saw some numbers where like 100 people had been vaccinated one day. And then yet I see figures where 1,000 or close to 1,000 people were vaccinated, like the following Saturday. So to me, I think that keeping that open should be mainly based upon numbers driven. And I'm afraid that I believe that once something comes up for children under 5, that parents will probably want to take them to their pediatrician rather than take them to us.
From what I would appreciate that from my understanding and conversation with the health department is that pediatricians will not be doing this.
Oh.
So the Mass Vac Center is going to be critically important.
Yeah, then it is.
So it's just, as we get additional knowledge on this, I think we have to be very careful of our opinions on this to make sure it's based on current, because it's a changing environment. It's a changing environment.
This seems to be one of those damned if you do and damned if you don't kind of things. So, I guess it's best to err on the side we're taking. Stay open.
Have to look at the dollars too.
Shepro, comment?
Shepro, Mr. Shepro.
I just, to the points that have been made, I think it is important that our messaging between everybody and the department itself be consistent this time.
I would.
Mr. Chair Bates, please.
Yes, Ms. Bates.
I would like to err on the damned if you do side of this issue.
Yeah.
Let's keep it open.
And well, this is just a conversation right now.
Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
We did that. We are.
Yeah, we completed roll call and went back to
We
discussion.
did?
Yes.
Oh,
We did that.
oh, okay, that's right. P, resolution authorizing contract. O,
Oh.
a resolution renewal of contract with a financial advisor.
Sanchez moves.
Sanchez moves,
Ford second.
Ford second, discussion. Mr. Johnson,
Oh, this is just a routine item. This would be the last year of renewal before we go out for RFP for a financial advisor. And there's no cost to the county unless, of course, we do a bond
no,
issue.
all right. Any discussion? Surgeon,
Mr. Onsick, if I can, this is just to help me. Is this a situation where you would use an RFQ rather than an RFP? and I only say that because I just learned of RFQs and I'm trying to figure out what's when do you appropriately use that versus not? And feel free to say I don't have an answer to that.
I'm not sure that I can explain it
Perfect,
because
that's
I,
fine.
I just know in this situation for professional services that we use a request for proposals.
Okay,
Professional
just trying to educate myself as we go along, so.
Professional services.
Mr. Chairman, Bates, please.
Yes, Ms. Bates.
Could I ask why we need a financial advisor? Oh, this is for our investments, that kind?
No.
No, this is
That's
the
what my
financial.
financial advisor does, so.
Okay, the financial advisor is the one who assists the county in obtaining financing for, it's typically a bond issue. Like, for example, with the multi-use facility, the bond issue for there was handled with our financial advisor. Also, for anything that we've done, the toll bridge, the refinancing that we just did. So that's their role. They're independent. And so it's basically a required role that we need to have someone outside of the county involved.
Okay, thanks a lot.
This is just a contract to have them available. We're not using them at this point in time. It's just to have them available when we do need them. So any other discussion?
Thank you.
Roll call, please.
Ford,
Yes.
Leonard. Leonard. Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Sanchez, yes.
Surges.
Surgeon.
Leonard, yes.
Thank you. Tepe,
Tepe, yes.
Berman.
Berman, yes. Thank you. Item P, a resolution authorizing contract for mandated service study. Now,
Sanchez moves.
Mr. Honzek, do we have a,
Oh, presentation.
Sanchez moves,
Surgeon seconds.
there's a second. Mr. Honzek.
Oh, I just noticed there's an error in the title. We're not authorizing a contract, we're authorizing an RFP or a request for proposals. So the title should be changed.
Bates, please.
Ms. Bates,
So this is for mandated services study. We did that, we've done that before, correct? Do we need to,
True.
is this an ongoing basis?
Well, the purpose of this would be to update it. And the cost is $100,000, or an estimate is to have it updated to be $100,000. So that's why before we go through the trouble of actually doing the RFP, we wanted to make sure that you and the board would be in favor of doing this and updating it. And so it's being presented to you for your consideration.
Okay, thanks. This is just the RFP. So this is not the spending. This is the thinking about spending.
Yes.
Oh,
Pardon me?
Shepro comment, as I read the summary in front of us, it authorizes the chairman to enter into a contract to perform the study. So this is not thinking about it. This is $100,000 contract with the option of upgrading it to 150.
Thank you, Mr. Shepro.
Am I wrong about that?
I have to, are you looking at the summary? That could be wrong. I mean, it's
Sanchez here, the summary does talk about a contract with for Fiscal Choice Consulting, but in the now therefore be it resolved section of the actual resolution, it does mention a request for proposal, not a contract or a company. So I think perhaps in the summary, we would want to amend.
yes, I apologize. I drafted the resolution, but I did not see the summary. So I must have somehow got copied from the original and I wasn't aware of that. I apologize.
So this is only up for consideration
For an
if
RFP.
it's an RFP?
Yes, the resolution itself does, it's very clear that it's for a request for proposal. It's not for a contract, but the summary is incorrect and the title is incorrect.
So this is non-binding when we go out for an RFP, correct?
right?
Or when we think about it?
Yeah.
Correct.
Mr. Chair, my second stands, and if we could clean up the language on the summary for the full board, that'd be great.
And the title of the resolution itself, I believe.
Yes.
I think what Mr. Honzek is really looking for is just our acceptance of the opportunity to go out for for RFP, so.
Mm,
And if,
We would like the record to reflect.
right.
The
very good.
summary is inaccurate
Yeah.
to the resolution.
Yeah.
Bates, please.
Ms. Bates,
So because we've done the mandated studies before, do we think that, I guess I don't quite understand what this means. Do we think that we need another $150,000 study of the mandates, even though we've done it before?
Madam Chair,
The last time the study was done was in 2017, and that's based on legislation by both the federal and the state, what are mandated services. We know for a fact that due to the Safety Act, there are quite an extensive amount of mandated services that we have to supply. We want to ensure that we are aware of those as a board so that as we go forward in looking at budget, we know what we have to, I mean, literally, we have to, and what we don't have to.
Correct. That's what mandated means. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
Mhm.
Oh, Mr.
Ford, and this is not to exceed 150. So it's not saying we're going to spend 150. It's not to exceed.
Doesn't that
Well,
usually mean,
Well, we,
Mr. Chairman, on this particular study, Human Services does have our business analysis review and study going on. This is a major component, in my opinion, of that. I don't know how we look at the goods and services that we offer at the county without a firm understanding of what are we required to do at the very most minimal basic level in the charter for each department that we have. So this is truly, this is ground zero, the building block, the foundation of where I think we need to begin.
I think that was the reason for discussing it and bringing it up. And I think the estimate is probably going to be more than 100,000 rather than 150,000 because we did it 4 years ago, was it, Joe, or
It was longer. Yeah.
been longer than that? 5 years ago, okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't remember the exact year, but this summary is just completely wrong. There's no, I don't know that there's any correct word in it, so I apologize.
Well, at least I feel better about bringing it up.
yeah, I
Yeah.
feel better about bringing it up too. Thank you.
Comment, Shepro?
Yeah, bro.
I am just baffled by the nature of this contract. I don't get to vote today, but at this point, I would vote against this. At $100,000 to $250 an hour, that's 400 hours to tell us what services we are required by law to perform. And that's a legal question. I don't understand what these people are going to do for 400 hours of work to tell us what, I mean, we are updating with some new statutes. I just find this amount to be staggeringly high and unnecessary.
Well, one thing is to say what we should be doing. The other is to say, what are we doing and how much are we spending on that? And I think that's the depth of what we're looking at. isn't
Well,
it,
I
Mr.
guess
Hunter?
I will look forward to seeing the RFP.
Right. The part of what they do is they estimate the cost. And so they go through the individual departments and actually there's a time study it's not performed by the consultants, but what is provided to the consultants is an allocation of the department employee staff time to the various tasks. So it's a very large project in terms of trying to get a handle on the actual cost of the various mandated services as well. So it's not only determining what is mandated, it's also determining what the cost is so that we know then what we can possibly save.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Surges? Joe, can I assume, like, I don't know if you sat in with the meeting last night at all, but when State's Attorney Mosser spoke of the needs of all the changes that she's mandated, if you will, to be performing, I'm assuming that within this report, it kind of quantifies that number for us so that we can say, okay, where's that money coming from? Yeah, I mean, it's great that these are the new laws coming down from Springfield, but if we don't know what those laws are going to take us to put in on a budget that's already screamingly tight, I don't know how I don't know how I base an opinion or make a decision without having this data. So Ken, I don't know that 400 hours is, I don't know that that's off target when some of this stuff is so complex, you could spend a month on it. That's just my opinion.
To follow up on that, when we give the next, when Judicial Public Safety has its next meeting, I believe that was March 10th, when the elected officials over at the Justice Center present this report, part of this is going to be what the actual costs, their future costs are going to be to provide for this, so that we have an idea of what it is. This will assist with the specificity of that, where they can give a general idea. This will give a much more specific amount for the board so that they can have a better understanding of what these costs are of this legislation. It's going to be, that alone was really impetus for considering this request of the mandated services, because this is going to be a very expensive endeavor.
Well,
Mr. Martin.
there's no question about that.
And I agree with Mr. Shepro that we want to make sure the money is judiciously spent, but I agree with Cliff as to the importance and
Is this speaking?
this is John Martin. I'm sorry, Mavis.
Thank you.
And to the point of the whole conversation, we have a whole list of wants that everybody brings to the table when we talk about things. But if my recollection serves me correctly, I think 70% of our budget is spent on the judicial public safety aspect of the county. And a huge portion of that is mandated. So when we bring our list of wants, the available funds for that, when you look at what are not only our monetary constraints, but what we should be as far as being fiscally responsible, we don't have a lot of latitude. This isn't a budget we can sit and play with and do a lot of stuff with. And I think it's very important to have good figures, because a lot of the things that people have in mind, I'm always amazed when you go to candidate forums or League of Women Voters things, and people who have never served on the county board are asked what they want to do when they get elected. And the answers are magnificent and typically absurd, because we have, but if you look at what we don't have discretion with, we've spent almost all of our money. I mean, the KDOT has to spend the money in a manner that complies with the sources of our funds. The judicial public safety sector has to meet its responsibilities. And when you look at what's left, it's nickels and dimes. So I think having those numbers in place makes it far easier for us to analyze conversations and control conversations relative to future economic expenditures.
Oh, absolutely. And it's not just judicial public safety with the Safety Act. We heard yesterday, and I think we're all aware of the impact that IT is going to have with the supports of the film, hiring individuals who will be able to edit the film and process the film so that a jury or a judge can see the film. And we're talking about hundreds of hours of film that maybe have to be edited down to a 20-minute presentation.
Madam Chair, Surges here.
Yes.
I sat in one of our courtrooms a month ago and watched the ping pong going on between attorneys saying, well, I didn't get that piece of film in my email or on my cell phone, and then back to the state's attorney's office, then back to the judge, then, okay, we'll reset it for another date. When the next attorney comes up and goes, we were supposed to get it, I didn't get it. This sounds like the most trivial thing in the world. It ties up more time than you could possibly imagine. And I know some of us are sitting here rolling our eyes thinking it's a warehouse with, cardboard boxes in it. We're talking about digital technology that will change the way things run. And it's just scary to think about what we don't know and how we're going to try and overcome this. So,
And we don't have bail money any longer.
it's unbelievable.
If I may, the other thing that concerned me about yesterday's conversation is that perhaps the delay in hearing the caseload because of having to review all the film. So instead of, she mentioned, instead of seeing 3 or 4 cases a day, it may just be 1. And that means, where do those people go? They don't have justice served at a rapid manner or a prudent manner or a timely manner.
Yeah, we have to get this right.
This may
All
be
right.
5 months down the road.
All right, I think we need to call a question. Could we, roll call, please?
Ford,
Yes.
Leonard, Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Sanchez, yes.
Sturgis,
Surges, yes.
Tepe,
Tepe, yes.
Berman.
Berman, yes.
Passes.
I'm going to jump ahead to item U, a resolution adopting training policy to the Personnel Policy Handbook.
Surges moves.
Sturgis moves,
Tepe seconds.
Happy second, discussion.
Mr. Chair, Surges here. Just a
Surges.
reminder that in this process, we've tried to separate the notion of tuition reimbursement into 2 buckets, one of them being tuition reimbursement versus continuing education and training. It's an extremely complex scenario because the language that's used by the IRS doesn't fit the definitions that we're trying. So you call one thing tuition reimbursement, they call it training and vice versa, and it muddies the waters just a bit. But suffice it to say, we have tried to separate these 2, isolate them, and this is just the one of them coming through independent of the other.
Very good. You know, it's hard to get perfection.
And I'm sure that 10 years from now, somebody will look
Right.
back at us
That's
again
what I
and
mean.
say,
Yeah.
what were they thinking?
Yeah.
Why, we're doing the best we can with what we have to date. And we're just trying to reshape that a bit. And that's not to say that we shouldn't reshape it in 5 years and revisit it.
Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Ford,
Yes.
Leonard, Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Sanchez, yes.
Sturgis,
Surges, yes.
Tepe,
Tepe, yes.
Berman.
Berman, yes. Thank you, Mr. Sturgis, for your committee's work on that. Going back to item Q, a resolution authorizing professional services for consulting and project management for the Information Technology Department.
Sanchez moves.
And just moves.
Ford second.
Ford second. Discussion. Any questions? I think we're just doing the same. Continuing on. Roll call, please.
Ford,
Yes.
Leonard, Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Sanchez, yes.
Sturgis,
Surges, yes.
Tepe,
Tepe, yes.
Berman.
Berman, yes. Thank you. R is a resolution authorizing the extension of existing contracts for outpatient drug treatment services for the King County Court Services. Sanchez moves.
Ford second.
Ford second. Discussion. Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Ford,
Yes.
Leonard, Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Sanchez, yes.
Sturgis, Tepe,
Tepe, yes.
Berman.
Berman, yes. Item S, a resolution authorization for the intergovernmental agreement with the Supreme Court of Illinois for the lease extension of space in the 3rd Street Courthouse for the 16th Circuit Arbitration Center.
Martin moves.
Moves.
Sanchez seconds.
Sanchez second. This is just a continuation of a lease agreement. Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Ford,
Yes.
Leonard, Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Sanchez, yes.
Tepe,
Tepe, yes.
Berman.
Berman, yes.
Passes.
Thank you. Item T, a resolution authorizing intergovernmental agreement with Elgin Community College, Kishwaukee College, and Wabansie Community College for the provision of WIOA training services.
Ford moves.
Ford moves.
Tempe seconds.
Tempe seconds. So this is federally funded, reimbursed with it.
Workforce development.
Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Ford,
Yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Sanchez, yes.
Pepe,
Tempe, yes.
Berman.
Berman, yes. Moving on, item V, a resolution authorizing ongoing intergovernmental agreement between Plato Township and the County of Kane for household hazardous waste collection services. Motion, please.
Sanchez moves.
Sanchez moves.
Ford seconds.
Ford second. Discussion. Roll call, please.
Ford,
Yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Sanchez, yes.
Pepe,
Tempe, yes.
Berman.
Berman, yes.
Passes.
Thank you. And item W, a resolution approving January 2022 claims paid to the tune of $20,584, 584,541.50. Any discussion? Oh, we need a board. We need a movement.
Sanchez moves.
Sanchez moves.
Ford seconds.
Ford second. Discussion. Roll call, please.
Ford,
Yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Sanchez,
Sanchez, yes.
Pepe,
Tempe, yes.
Berman.
Berman, yes.
Passes.
Thank you. That concludes our new business. I have no old business. Does anyone have any old business?
Ask for unanimous consent to place reports on file.
As a motion to get unanimous consent. Anybody against that? We need a second on that?
Nope.
We have authorization. I think it's unanimous consent. Very good. We have no need of an executive session.
Sure.
In honor of Mr. Kenyon, I move for adjournment.
Sanchez, second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oh, good.
Thank you, everybody.